Good day, everyone. While we are waiting for people to join the call, I think I can start with a question, and the question is, will AI take over the world? So the simple answer is yes. AI is projected to have a lasting impact on just about every industry imaginable. We are already seeing artificial intelligence in smart devices, cars, healthcare systems, and many more. So this will continue, and we see its influence in many other industries for the foreseeable future. So with that introduction, let me also introduce myself. I'm Sudarshan Pavanje, the product owner for Data Attribute Recommendation Service. With me, I have Michael Haas, the architect for Data Attribute Recommendation Service, and also Prashant Gautam, the product manager for Workflow Intelligence. So let's move on to the agenda. So the complete idea of this workshop is to have built a story around the data attribute recommendation. So what we have as part of this story is an introduction to data attribute recommendation service, followed by the regression scenario for data attribute recommendation. So in this, you will have an idea of what are the different endpoints that we have as part of the data attribute recommendation and how easy it is to consume the data attribute recommendation service. Followed by the first hands-on, we have the workflow intelligence, intelligent approvals hands-on, wherein we can see how data attribute recommendation service is used by one of our internal stakeholders for getting the recommendation. So this will be the second hands-on that you would be going through later in this session. Yeah, with that agenda, let's get into what is data attribute recommendation. Yeah, so this is one of the business challenges that we have taken to explain what exactly is data attribute recommendation service is all about. So Bob is from the master data team. So his job is to fill in the material table with the subcategories and the categories for each of the line items in the material table, in the material master table. Now, this is a very repetitive task and also a time-consuming task for Bob to do this, because he has to first get the right information about the categories and the subcategories, which is time-consuming, and also it takes a lot of time for him to get this information from the data provider. Okay, now how can we make the life easy for Bob? So with AI approach, what we do is we take the historical data along with the ground truths. So that is nothing but the category and the subcategory, which is hand categorized. We train a model out of it. So once we have a model with a decent accuracy, now Bob is ready, wherein he can use this model for further recommendation of the categories and the subcategories. Yeah, so here you could see that for any further request that comes into the the material master data table, he can now use the data attribute recommendation service, wherein it can now recommend the categories as well as the subcategories, so that it could reduce a lot of time for Bob. At the same time, we all know that how important is the master data table, because it has been referenced in most of the places, and we have to make sure that the quality of the data that is present in the master data is always good. So with that, whenever there's a new master data that comes in, or an inconsistent data that is there in the master data or the transactional data, and also the missing attributes in the master or the transactional data, this can be now fed to the data attribute recommendation service, which would now give you the recommendation of the correct values that has to be entered into your master and the transactional data, which would actually fill the missing attributes. So with this, we have a consistent master data as well as the transactional data. So this is what I'm talking about, one use case, but data attribute recommendation can be used for many other use cases where you have a good data set and you can do the categorization. So with this, it reduces a lot of time for you to maintain your master data. At the same time, Bob can now focus on value added task rather than doing the same repetitive job of updating the master data table. So with that, we'll get into different business scenarios. So the first scenario that I would be talking about is automatic prediction of the missing master data fields in the new product introduction. So whenever there's a new product that gets introduced, so a new material request, a creation request would come in the form of a CSV file, or it could be through a web-based tool. This information will not have all the information that we need for entering into the material master table. So how do we get all the missing values that we need so that we make the master data table consistent? So in this case, what we could do is we could take this data, collate it, and then send it to the data attribute recommendation service, wherein this would now recommend or predict all the missing fields that is needed for the master data table. So with this, we would now get a consistent master data. And as we all know, this is one voice and this is one source of truth, which is referenced in most of the places. So with this, we also get a quality master data that can be reused in all the places. The second scenario business use case that I would want to discuss is intelligent sales order creation process. Again, in the case of sales order creation, so it could be online, it could be EDI, or through an email. The sales order can be created by a service agent or a bot, but the information that is there in the sales order are incomplete. So this would lead to a delay in the delivery process, at the same time a missed opportunity. So how can data attribute recommendation help here is by taking this data and then we enhance it by predicting the incomplete fields in the sales order, so that the sales order creation process can be drastically improved. So with this, we significantly reduce the manual effort for order completion, at the same time expedite overall sales order processing. The next one I would like to talk about is the commodity code prediction. So often we know that while we do this international trade, so there's something called as a commodity code that will be attached to the products that we trade with. So if the commodity codes are wrongly assigned, then there is a long waiting hours on the border. So this would be a high cost for the organization. So how can data attribute recommendation help over here? So data attribute recommendation takes various fields related to the commodity as input, and then with the correct and then predict the correct values for learning from the logic behind the complex fields. So with this, we reduce it reduces manual effort for commodity code assignment, at the same time decreases the cost. So as I mentioned, there could be a huge cost if the commodity codes are wrongly assigned, and you will have to wait on the borders for getting this corrected. The last one I would like to talk about is the intelligent approvals. So I already spoke about the sales order completion workflow. So this is the next step. So wherein after the sales order is created, then it goes into approval. So in the approval process, it could be approved or it could be rejected. Again, there could be different reasons where the approver needs to take a decision on if this particular sales order has to be approved or has to be rejected. Now, how can DAR help here? Is we can now have the sales order via the via the DAR, that is the Data Attribute Recommendation Service, which would now give a decision on whether to reject or approve a particular sales order, depending on the confidence level. Again, this would be very much interesting in the case where the approver goes on leave. So in this case, the substitute who would have to approve a particular sales order can take decisions on the confidence level that we provide, at the same time on the explanation, which is currently not part of the solution, but going forward will be part of the solution. So this is exactly the workflow that Prashant also will be showing us in the second part of the hands-on exercise. So with that, I move to the final slide, wherein I would want to talk about the different components that we have as part of the data attribute recommendation service. So today, what we have in data attribute recommendation service is different templates which would cater different requirements. So we have the generic template, which is again a deep learning template that we have to support, which supports multi-label, multi-class classification. Then we have the hierarchical template. Again, this is a deep learning template that we have, which again, if your data is structured in a hierarchical way, then probably you can use this template for coming up with a good model. The third one is an AutoML template, wherein when you have a data set wherein you don't have much idea on what kind of a data it is, you can just give it to the AutoML template, and it does a model search wherein it finds the best model that would suit for the data that you have uploaded, and comes up with a good model on that data. And and we also have the business blueprint template that we are planning to introduce later this year. So this is mainly a business specific scenario that we are trying to build, and this will be again a template that we are going to have. So what will this business blueprint template ideally do in the case of invoice object recommendation? So this would be for recommendation of the GL accounts as well as the cost centers for invoices that has no purchase orders. So the concept of blueprint is something generic that we are building, wherein for very specific business use cases, we can have multiple templates that are built out of the box, and the users can use it if it is meeting their requirements. And the next one that I'm going to talk about is the regression template. So this is the first three: the generic template, the hierarchical template, and the AutoML are the classification templates that we have. And we have newly introduced a regression template for predicting the numerical values. Also in the future, we are planning to have the non-textual template, but yeah, this is in the roadmap, but we currently don't have it as part of our product today. Also, I'd like to mention that the S/4HANA integration now becomes much easy via the ISLM that we support. So this would be released in the Q1 of next year. So with that, integration to S/4HANA should be much simpler and easy. So with that introduction, I would now hand it over to Michael Haas for the first hands-on on a regression scenario with data attribute recommendation.
Thank you very much, Sudarshan. Hi, I'm Michael. I'm the architect of the data attribute recommendation team. Before that, I was working also as a developer and as a QA responsible. And today I want to walk with you through the first portion of the hands-on workshop that we have. The workshop itself, we have some materials prepared for you. These are hosted on github.com. In this TechEd 2021 in 360 repository. And we are, by the way, very lucky because we also have two people supporting us in the chat. So we have Dominic and Dennis with us, and I hope that also Dominic can now share this link with the participants so that you can just click on it and also follow along with the workshop. Before we can get started, I want to mention two things. So how you can get support. So if there's any kind of a problem now during the workshop, so while we are doing this live, you can just use the chat. And get support this way if you happen to do the workshop maybe on your own later, or also if you follow along with the recording that we'll publish eventually. You can basically just use the issues tab on GitHub and just create an issue there, and then we will see what we can do. So basically someone will take care of that. The second thing actually is that we also have some requirements for this workshop. More specifically, it's actually only one requirement. And if you do not have this in place, you will not be able to actually do the exercises in the workshop. And the requirement is basically that you need to have a trial account on the business technology platform in the US East AWS region. So if you do not already have a trial account, we have some instruction here for that. Basically, this is also quite straightforward. Basically, you can go to the business technology platform trial page, which I've linked here, and there you can create a trial account. If you're participating in a workshop, I think you should already be able to log in on this page and just go ahead and create your account. If you are not able to log in, then we have a second tutorial linked here, which is called Get a Free Account on SAP BTP Trial. And this will walk you just through the whole process. So basically, if you get lost and somehow the first link absolutely does not work for you, use the second link. Again, the most important thing is here, please you will be asked to select a region where you want to create the instance. And here it's important that you choose US East AWS, because the service, the data attribute accommodation service, is right now not available in the other regions. So for example, if you would choose Singapore, this simply would not work. Okay, now maybe some of you might already have a trial account, maybe even from last year, or maybe because you were following along with some other exercises in the meantime. And here you also then can check if it's set up correctly. If you already have a trial account because you've created in the past, you should check if it's set up correctly. And this is again about the Amazon Web Services, where basically you need to have the sub account created in this US East region on AWS. And you can check this by basically going into your trial account. So let me just do that. I will just log in here. So this takes a minute. And what you should see here is if you log in, you have your global account, and then you see one sub account, which is in the US East region on AWS. If you do not see that, we have some instructions here, how you can basically rectify that. So you can create a new sub account, so you can just work through that. All right, then let me get back here to the main page, and we can dive directly into the first exercise. So I will basically click here on this link. By the way, we also have the slides that Sudarshan just presented here, and later we also have some slides by Prashant, which are also linked here. But let's for now go for exercise 1. Okay, well, if you so far were not able to see my screen, then I think you didn't miss out a lot, because I was just going through the initial documentation. You can also just do that on your own. But in any case, yeah, sorry for the technical hiccup there. I do hope you can see now. So let's go back on the topic. The workshop that we have, it's basically organized as a Jupyter Notebook, which means a Jupyter Notebook is basically just a nice way of combining documentation and code. So we have the documentation which explains things, and then the code is the actual hands-on part. And to run the Jupyter Notebook, you need to have a Jupyter lab environment. And the easiest way basically is to just launch that in a cloud service. And for this purpose, we can use mybinder.org. So basically on this link here, which maybe also Dominic can now share in the chat, you can just click on that. And sorry, did not want to open this. I will just open this in a new tab here. And now this will basically bring up the notebook. While this is running, let me maybe just explain a little bit more. mybinder.org is a free offering, so it's not affiliated by SAP. We are just very lucky that we can use this for the purpose of the workshop. And since it's a free service, there's basically some caveats. For example, your session will be terminated after 10 minutes of inactivity, so you have to be a little bit mindful with your coffee breaks and maybe time them to be 9 minutes. And also, once you are done and you want to keep the notebook with the outputs that we have created and maybe your own notes, you can just download it. So if you want to keep that, please download it, because it will not be persisted. And of course, this, since it's an independent service, it's not somehow bound by the usual SAP data protections and the usual things. So please do not also upload any kind of private data there. So just to make that clear, this is our disclaimer that we have here. If you want to have more control over the whole process, you can also just execute this locally inside of Docker. So this might take you maybe 5 more minutes to set up. And we have some instructions here on how you can achieve that. Having said that, aha, this is interesting. Sorry. So now you see sometimes this can go a little bit wrong. And now let me just try this again. Let's see, maybe we have more luck this time. Yeah, so in the My Binder, you can usually see some kind of a preview of the notebook. And now if you're actually super curious, you could even see some kind of things, what's going on here in the background. Yeah. Yeah, so this, again, typically takes a while. Maybe we can already proceed in the meantime. So basically, maybe you're now following along in the workshop and you just can give this some time to load. If it doesn't work, maybe you can also just try to reload, but here it actually seems like it's launching something. So maybe we get lucky. But I have basically, for the purpose of the workshop, I already have my local environment because it's just a little bit more stable. So I will just continue with that. Actually, it seems to have loaded now. Oh, no, sorry, it's still loading. Once this link is loading, you will see on your screen something similar to what I have here. And now I think we are in business because we now have the Jupyter Notebook up and running, and we can actually proceed with that. And the purpose actually of the first exercise today is that we will look into a new feature of the data attribute recommendation service, the regression model template. And you already have seen this in Sudarshan's presentation. We were in the past more focused on classification use cases. And now as a new feature, we have also added regression, which basically means that instead of predicting something out of a finite set of categories or classes, we can now basically predict a number, right? And to show you what this means and maybe how we can leverage that, we have prepared a little business scenario where we will look into real estate valuation. So basically, we will predict house prices based on historical house pricing data. And in this workshop, we will cover several aspects of how you can interact with the service. We will look into data upload, we will look into the model training and model deployment, and finally, we will also look into inference requests. And throughout the workshop, we will use the Python Sdk for data attribute recommendation. So the data attribute recommendation service uses a RESTful API and so over HTTP. And just to make that a little bit nicer to use from Python, we also have a software development kit for the Python language, and we will just use that. If you have never used Python before, that's perfectly fine because it's all very friendly and the notebook actually works out of the box. How you can use a notebook. So a Jupyter Notebook, as I said before, it combines code and documentation. And to run the exercises here, you can just follow the instruction in the documentation cells. So a cell is, by the way, always one of these things here. You can see that there's individual kind of cells, let's say, or boxes that you can mark. And sometimes you also have some additional information here hidden in some boxes with this pencil icon. So you can basically just click on this if you want to learn more, but typically it's not necessary. Finally, we also have code cells, and on the code cells, you have a play button up here, and you can click on that, and then it will execute the code, but I will also show you this. Okay, then let's get started with exercise 1.1. The first thing that we need to do is we need to create a service instance and a service key. So data attribute recommendation is a software or platform as a service offering more or less on the business technology platform offered by SAP, which means that you can create a service instance of this service, and then you can basically create a service key, which is basically the credentials to give you access to that service instance. For this purpose, we can go to the trial account. So let's just open this link, by the way. Just a heads up, the Jupyter Notebook, it tends to hijack your right click. So basically you can, if you want to right click, you can just hit Shift and a right click, or you can also just click on the link as is, and it will always open in a new tab, which is what I wanted to do right now. So let me maybe quickly check the chat window here. All right, so there's no more complaints by my co-hosts about me sharing the wrong screen or anything like that. So this gives me some confidence that I'm doing the right thing here. So now back to business, we want to make the service instance and we want to make the service key. And here's one very nice feature in the BTP cockpit. We have boosters, and the booster is basically something like a shortcut that will put together several steps. And we have a booster for data attribute recommendation. So if you're on this booster screen, after you clicked on the booster button, you can just search for data attribute recommendation. Then you have here this cell where you can just click on that, and you will get some information on the booster. And what we can do here is we can just click on start, and now it will work a little while, and it will basically just do all the steps that you would otherwise need to do manually. So it's assigning the service quota so that you're actually kind of entitled to use the service. It's creating the service instance, and then afterwards it will create the key for you. So this just saves us 3 minutes here and a couple of clicks. And here we are. So you should now hopefully see that the booster is executed successfully. And now we have here several download links. And the interesting download link for us is the first one, which is basically a download service key. So I will just click on that. And now I get here this download dialog in my browser, and I will just save the file into a place where I can find it again. So I have here created a TechEd folder, and actually, let me just maybe create even a new folder here inside so that I do not get confused later on. And now I'm just saving this to disk. And that's all that we need to do here, right? So now we have a service key in the file, and this will enable us to connect to the service. So let's maybe scroll down to the second part of this exercise. So I've just now skipped some of the screenshots that I was showing you live. And now the task is we have downloaded the service key as the default key.json file to disk, so to my local computer. And now I need to upload this again back into this Jupyter Notebook. It is actually quite easy. Here on the left, you should have some kind of a file browser. If you do not have this, maybe you have collapsed it. So here's a button which will open and close this file browser. And here you have an upload button. So you can just click on upload files, and you can now select your default key.json, just click on open, and suddenly it's here. So there's two important things here, because I think this is mainly where you can go wrong. First, the default key.json must be actually next to this Jupyter Notebook file. So basically the workshop is implemented as a Jupyter Notebook, which is just a single file. It must be next to that. And also, it must be called exactly default key.json, otherwise it will not work. If for some reason you have a different name here, you can just rename that. All right. Let's move on to the final step here. We can now actually finally execute some code. So this is a code cell. You can see this is a slightly darker background, and more importantly, it contains code. Let's execute that. This is just some basic setup. And then the next step, we can basically just read the key file. So I will not bother you too much with the code, but basically we just read the file, and then we load this as a JSON document. And then we print some information. And inside of the service key, you have the service URL. This is kind of the endpoint for the REST-based API. And you also have a client ID. And the client ID is similar to username for the service. There's also something called a client secret inside, which is similar to password, but I'm not showing that to you because I want to keep my passwords private. And by the way, also your client ID will be different because it's unique, right? So please do not be surprised if it's different. Finally, we can now install the SDK. Let's also just click on that. And now we can see here it's downloading, and finally we see successfully installed data attribute recommendation. So by the way, if you do this at some later point, maybe the version number will also be different because we continue to update this. All right. I think this wraps up the first exercise. What we have done here, we have learned how we can get a service key for the service. Basically, this gives us access to our service instance. And of course, we've also seen how we can create this service instance using the booster. And we have also seen how we can install the Python SDK. Now, let's move on. In the second exercise, we will upload the demo data set to the service. And the data set that we have, I mentioned this earlier, we are looking into basically real estate valuation, or house prices. And there is a publicly available data set released by the Tamkang University in Taiwan under a Creative Commons license. And because of this open license, we're able to use it, and we are really grateful for that. We modified this lightly to clean it up a little bit, but it's mostly vanilla. And the data set is available inside of this data subdirectory here. So there's nothing for you to download. And we can now use pandas, which is part of the standard Python machine learning or data science stack as a tool to interact with any kind of data, to basically just read the CSV file and take a look at the first 5 items in there. And actually also let me execute the next cell. And what we see here now, we have basically 414 rows. So there's 414 pieces of transaction data. And each piece of transaction data contains 7 columns. And let's look at that. We have here the columns up here in this table. So this is the 5 things that we read out earlier. And we have a transaction date, which is quite interesting, is a kind of a fractional year. So this is a year as a fraction. And here we have 2013.5, which basically means half of 2013, or alternatively, this is basically just means June, right? So the house was sold or bought in June. So this is just, I think, a nice way of representing that to the service as a number. And this was, by the way, part of the default data. We also have the age of the house. We have the distance to the nearest public transport station. We have the number of convenience stores. So these are both, let's say, columns that are more related to the neighborhood quality. Maybe you can imagine if you have many convenience stores, the prices might be higher. And we have some geographical data, which is the latitude and the longitude. And finally, then we have what we want to predict, which is the house price. So this is, by the way, in New Taiwan dollars, because this is actually a data set that comes from Taiwan. And yeah, now what we will do in this workshop to make it really concrete, we will take this data set and based on the transaction date, the house age, the distance to the nearest public transport station, the number of convenience stores, the latitude, longitude, we will predict the house price per square meter. And to do that, we first need to create a dataset schema in the service. So the dataset schema is the way how you can describe your data to the service and how you can basically really make or fit the service to your specific use case, right? So I think we have all different data challenges. We all have different kinds of data. And as long as it's well, a CSV file and fits certain criteria, you can use the service to process that, very broadly speaking. And what you do here is you basically just say, okay, I have features and I have labels, and the features are the things that you use as the basis of the prediction, and the labels are the things that you want to predict. And this translates one-to-one to the CSV file. And in addition to giving the header of the column, so the name of the column, you also give the type. Right now, we have here only numbers. In general, the service also supports plain text. So for example, maybe sometimes you have a description of something in your database. This is always very good to include. You also have a category maybe sometimes, but just for this specific data set, we only have numbers. For the labels, the type is a little bit more restrictive because here you can only have category, which is what I think also Sudarshan has mentioned a lot. And now this is the new feature, the regression template, we have the number. And so this is why we also have the number here. What we do now is we just use the SDK. So now this is kind of code that we import from the SDK to just upload this dataset schema that we have described here to the service. And here we have the data manager client. We construct this from the service key. The service key is the variable that before we read that in and saved it as a variable. And then we call the create dataset schema method, upload this particular data structure, and we get back a response. So let's just execute that. All right, and immediately we got a response back. So I think this is really cool because in this workshop, at least, this is the first time we have actually interacted with the service. And now in your service instance, there's a record of your dataset schema. And we got back the same response, more or less, just with 2 additional fields. One is the created at, where the service remembers when it was created. And also we get an ID. And this ID is auto-generated by the service for you. And if you want to use this dataset schema later on, you will have to use this ID, which is also why we save this inside of a variable called dataset schema ID. All right, now with the dataset schema in place, we can actually upload the data. And for this, we create a dataset. And this dataset has a name and it references the dataset schema ID by this variable. We just execute this call and then we get again back a response from the service where, interestingly, among other things, we have here status, which is no data. And what this means, we have now created some kind of an empty bucket. We have created a data set with this ID without data, and now we can upload the data. First, let's compress that so that it uploads a little bit better. And then we can use the upload data to dataset method to upload this dataset, to upload to this dataset that we created earlier, which is right now empty. We upload the file that we created. So let's just do that. And now you can see here, we again got back this response. And here now the status changed actually from no data to validating. And what this means is that a dataset validation is a background process where basically the service is now checking if the CSV file that you just uploaded corresponds to the dataset schema that you provided earlier. And this is running in the background. And given that we have the ID of the dataset, we can basically just ask, hey, what is the current status? Are you done yet? And for this purpose, we have a method here, which is wait for dataset validation. So let's also just go ahead and execute that. All right. Okay, I'm checking the chat. There's still no messages about me sharing the wrong screen or anything like that. So I guess I'm actually really good this time. This is it's very nice. As I said earlier, this is now a background process. So somewhere there is in some Kubernetes cluster is some process running that looks at your data set and compares it against the dataset schema, and then it will report back the status. And sometimes this is very fast if the job gets scheduled earlier, or sometimes it takes a little bit longer, depending how busy the server is. And in the meantime, maybe we can already take a look at some of the resources. So while this is running, we can maybe have some diversion. I put this here as break time. Of course, you can also take a break. I don't get to take a break. We have some resources here. And when I click on this, this will basically take me to a place down in the notebook. And let's just take a look at this. So basically, if you want to learn more after the workshop, please go here to this section. And the first thing that we have here is, of course, just the pointer to the Github repository if you want to visit this again of this workshop. As I mentioned before, if you want to get support, if there's anything wrong with the workshop, please just use the GitHub issues, or if you're doing it live, please use the chat, and we will get to that. We also have some resources on data attribute recommendation itself, but maybe, I think maybe this might be done. So let me, scroll up again. No, sorry, that was wrong. It is still polling here. Then let me maybe just go back down. That was a false alarm. So we also have several resources on data attribute recommendations on the product itself. And I think the main entry point for any kinds of inquiries that you might have is just to have the sub-help portal, where you can find all kinds of information. So this is here the main entry point. You can learn, again, in more detail, what is data attribute recommendation, how much does it cost, which might also be relevant. You can see the release notes, for example. I assume in there you would now find that we recently released the regression feature. And you also have some links to additional tutorials and so on. Let me maybe check back. I think it might be done now. Sorry, I was actually using the wrong one here. Let me just close that. And now I'm back here on my own notebook. All right, so the break is over. We are now back with the dataset validation. Let's ignore the SAP help portal for now. We are back with the dataset validation. And here we can see, after, well, asking several times, the dataset is now in status succeeded. And we get also a validation message here that says the entire dataset is valid. And this means we are done with the exercise 1.2, because we have now learned how we can create a dataset schema. And I think this is really a key part, how we can describe your unique data set and your unique business problem to the service. So this is customizable. And we also learned how we can upload a data set to the service. Then let's move on to exercise 1.3. In this exercise, we will learn how to train the model. Now, the prerequisite is that the data set is uploaded and it has been successfully validated by the service against the dataset schema. And now we can use the service to gain insights from this data. And here, before we can do that, we first have to do another kind of modeling decision, which is relevant to the kind of business problem that we make, right? So this is similar in a sense. You use the dataset schema to describe your business problem to the service. And you can also choose the machine learning algorithm that is used to further describe your business problem. And here, when I now say you can select a machine learning algorithm in the terminology of the service, is called a model template. And Sudarshan has already mentioned some model templates, so I will not actually do a deep dive here again. Just one thing that I want to mention, we have an Automl template. Sudarshan mentioned that, but what I have here for you is an interesting blog post on how this works internally. So if you're interested and want to learn more, please do check out the blog post. And then finally, we also have the regression template. And the main difference between the regression template and the 3 templates before is that the regression template will only predict numbers. So the others, they in a sense predict categories. So it's a classification problem that is being solved here. And the final one is basically if you want to predict the number, to put it like that. You also have a blog post from that. This is really recent. I think this was just came online on Monday. So if you want to learn more, again, check it out. Coming back to our business problem, we are looking at prices of houses. And for this, since we want to predict the number, we obviously have to use the regression template. So that is an easy choice. Now we want to start the training. To start the training, we need the IDs of the data set and act on also the desired model template. And let me just show you this here in the code. There is a model manager client. It has a create job method, and this takes the model name. The model name is anything that you want. You just have to make sure it's unique across your service instance. There's a dataset ID, which refers back to the dataset that we uploaded earlier. And also this is the model template ID, which is basically now this slightly unwieldy string. And yeah, you can just look up the model templates, for example, in this table or on help.sap.com. Let me just start that. Aha, there you see, I originally said you have to actually execute these cells in order, and it is true. If you do not execute them in order, it doesn't work. So my mistake was I missed this cell. Now I have executed both of them, and the job is submitted. And again, we got back some response here and also the identifier of the job that we created. And we can see again, the status is now pending. So this is similar to the data set validation. The job is now running in the background in some kind of background processing system. It's actually running in a Kubernetes cluster. And we now have to wait for the job to be scheduled, and we have to wait for the job to finish. And we have for this, again, a method here, which is wait for job. So let's call that. And we can now see there's an update here. The status is now running. And because the data set is very small, I kind of know, or I would expect if it's already running, then I think it will not take more than 1 minute. So this is just from my experience working with the data set. Yeah, a word on that. Typically, you would also use a lot more data than just 400 items, but of course, it depends how much annotated data you have and also what kind of precision do you need. But I think this is maybe a discussion for another workshop. While we are all taking this little break, maybe we can kind of go back to the SAP help portal. So I now kind of, let's switch the context, and we can take a look what other resources we do have. Here on help.sap.com, we have, if you're a developer, we have the API reference. So this is the RESTful API reference for the data attribute recommendation service, which describes to you what endpoints exist and what kind of inputs they take. You also have a reference here to the Python Sdk that we are using. If you want to look more into that, we have a security guide. And then we have also some general references that are not necessarily specific to the data attribute recommendation service, but just overall references if you learn, for example, more about machine learning, artificial intelligence, or the portfolio that we have in SAP AI Business Services. Now let's check what's going on here. So there is apparently some small problem with my internet connection, but it has recovered. That's fine. And we can see the job is still in status running. And by now you probably know what this means. Let's again spend some more time, look into the available resources to make like the most use of our time. I already just showed you the SAP help portal, and the API reference is also hosted there. I mentioned it earlier. We also have on developers.sap.com, we also have some tutorials, actually many tutorials that will also help you understand better the data attribute recommendation service. And here this is maybe even similar in scope of what we're doing with this workshop, but instead it's using Postman, and Postman is basically a very nice graphical user interface that lets you explore and interact with RESTful HTTP APIs. So it's not specific to the data attribute recommendation service, but you can absolutely use it to talk to that and understand the inner workings a little bit better. So yeah, this, I think, how long does it take to do that? So this is on the beginner level, it takes 1 hour 30. If you want to understand really the lower level API, please, yeah, feel free to check that out. This is very nicely done, actually. What else do we have here? I think there's one interesting thing. If you're using the trial account, then let's take a look at the trial account limits. This is something that I have not mentioned before. So if you're using this workshop, there's a pretty big chance that you are using the trial offering on SAP BTP. And for this offering, there are certain limits on how you can use the service. So to prevent abuse. And of course, these limits are not necessarily there when you use the paid version. So for example, when you upload now a data set on this trial offering, you can only upload 10 megabytes. And also the number of training jobs that you can have concurrently is also limited to 1. So you can only have 1 training job at a time. Typically, it's not a problem. Maybe more interesting is the number of deployed models. We will see later what a deployed model is. But basically, here you can also only have 1. And sometimes in the workshop, I have put in some notes. Basically, if you see certain error messages, that means you have used the resources and you need to free them up again. So just as a general heads up, sometimes there is a little note. If you see some odd error message, maybe look into that note. Anyways, then let's ignore the resources for now. We are now back in business here with our model training. We have uploaded the data before. We have started the training with our regression template. And we now have training in status succeeded with a progress of 1.0. And what this means is we can now inspect the model. So the model is the output of the training job, and we can read that basically. So there's a separate API method for that. And now we get back some statistics on the model. And here, the most interesting part here is the validation result. And this will tell you how good the model is. And I will try to give you maybe only a short version of that. What basically happens, you upload the data. In this case, we have uploaded 414 rows, and 10% of that data is not used for the training. 10% of that data is set aside. After the training is done, this so-called test set, the 10% that we set aside, which will roughly be 40 rows, will be used for prediction. So the model will predict for each of these housing transactions the price that it thinks would be correct. So this is the predicted price. And then inside of the data, there's of course also the real price, so the correct price in this last column. And by comparing these, the service gets some idea how good the model quality is. And in this case, we have a mean absolute error of 40. And this means that across all of these 40 data pieces that we had, the average error, so by counting together all the errors and then dividing by 40, was around 40 new Taiwan dollars. And by the way, I keep saying 40, the fact that the error is 40 has nothing to do with that we have 40 pieces of data used in the test set. This is just a coincidence. So basically, this is just comparing the predicted and the actual values and computing the average of that. This is an absolute in the sense that we are comparing absolute values. We also have the percentage error, which is kind of a relative value. And this means that on average, the predictions were 33% off. And now it's up to you. Kind of, this is something that you need to decide for your business case, what kind of error you want to tolerate, right? And what kind of error you want to see, because maybe sometimes you have very hard problems and then you will get a higher error. Maybe also your data is very noisy, then you will also get a higher error. Sometimes you do not have enough data. This is all things that that can happen, and you need always to really consider what you need to achieve and also where you want to stop. Finally, we have the mean squared error. The mean squared error is basically what is optimized during training. So this means that it's kind of the metric that the service tries to minimize. And basically, the squared here just means that the error is squared because then higher errors are penalized much higher, basically because they are squared. And this is just something that we are reporting here as well. Yeah. All right, then that means we are done with exercise 1.3. We have now looked how to select the correct model template. So if you have your business problem you want to solve, you also need to select the model template that will fit this problem the best. Of course, you're also welcome to just experiment with different model templates and then compare the different outcomes, because you always get some kind of evaluation here, and this will also be helpful in understanding what you need. And once you have selected the model template, we have looked into how you can train the model from this data set that you uploaded earlier, and we have also looked how you can understand the model performance from the model metrics. All right, now we have a model. And in exercise 1.4, we will look into how you can deploy the model, because by itself, the model is just a file that we put into a storage for you. So it's just persisted somewhere, but by itself, it doesn't do anything. When we deploy the model, we take that file and load it into a serving process. And then this serving process will be available for you to make inference calls. And when I say inference calls, it basically means you would send their, in terms of our workshop here, would send their housing price transaction or house transaction without the price, and you get it back with the price. That's just the basic idea of that. So let's create this deployment. This will spin up your own server for you. The create deployment method needs your model name that you selected earlier. So we have this stored here in this variable. And now we again get the same behavior as before. We get back the resource, we get an ID, and we also get back the status pending. So this is the same as before. This is now spawning a background process, actually spawning a server process, and it can take 1 or 2 minutes. So we again have here a method which is called wait for deployment. And the wait for deployment method gets the deployment ID. And let's just call that. And then let's see what it says here. All right. While we are here waiting for this deployment to succeed, maybe I can point out 2 things for you. I have mentioned earlier, so this is, by the way, now not a comment on the actual deployment, but rather on the trial limit. So I switch the topics again a little bit. If you get some kind of error message here saying the resource can no longer be used because the usage limit has been reached, you can kind of just pop this out and you will get kind of some instructions how you can rectify that. This relates to the limits on the trial account that I mentioned earlier. And also one more thing, the deployment that you're creating will be stopped after 8 hours because it's really a separate server process that actually uses some resources. So for trial, it's stopped after 8 hours, which means if you kind of want to pick this up again tomorrow and you want to run some inference calls, you will basically get an error message. And again, you can basically also use these methods to fix that. The alternative is to basically just run the whole notebook from scratch again. All right, so then let's wait for the deployment to succeed. Maybe there's room to look at some more resources. Yeah. Okay, yeah, let's just give this 1 minute. And in the meantime, we can maybe again switch the context a little bit, and I can show you again what else we have if you want to learn more. So I'm now back here on my resources section. I've just told you a little bit about these trial account limits. I think what I've also mentioned already, we have some very nice blog posts if you want to look a little bit behind the scenes and learn how it works for Automl and for regression. And if you want to read even more, we also have some other blog posts. So I think, yeah, we are even quite active there. If you're interested in the Python SDK itself, so the Python SDK is what we use in this workshop. This is, for example, the model manager client class, which then sits on top of this RESTful DAR API. We also have this basically published as an open source project on GitHub. So yes, if you feel like it, send patches if you see any problems there. And you can see basically just yesterday we even changed something here. So this is, by the way, something that we maintain, and we also use this internally. So you could say that this is even battle tested. And yeah, if you want to learn even more about that, we also have some quite extensive documentation here, again, on the SDK. So you can also use the SDK for prototyping, what we do here with the Jupyter Notebook, or you could even build your own Python-based application with that. Okay, then let's switch the topics again. Let me go back to my deployment. And what do we have here? We can see that the deployment is now in status succeeded. And this means we can move on to executing inference requests. Let me just check the time. Okay, I have maybe 3 more minutes. Then let's do this, I would say. As I said earlier, you basically give to the service your record or your data object, and obviously you will not have the thing that you want to predict, right? This is why you want to do the machine learning in the first place. So now what I'm doing here is I'm sending a request, and this request contains 2 objects, and each object has features, and the features again correspond directly to my original dataset schema or to my CSV file. And here I basically just have the transaction date, the house age, and so on. And we use the inference client to send this to the service. Again, we specifically send this inference request to a specific model name, which we trained earlier. So let me just run this. All right. And now we get back the response from the service, and we get back the predictions. We get back 2 predictions because we sent 2 objects. And for the first object that we sent, the prediction is actually 142. So this means that for this object, the service believes that the price should be 142 new Taiwan dollars per square meter. For the second object, the price is a little bit higher. Here it's 187. So this is basically how you can leverage the service to predict the price, or basically any feature, how you can predict the label for unseen data. I maybe want to take 1 minute to talk a little bit about the STD, the standard deviation that we get here. So I have now here some example predictions. So this will not be exactly the same as the example predictions, as the predictions that we got before. What the standard deviation means. So the value is kind of just a point prediction, kind of what is the best fit. But if you just know the value, you have no idea how confident the service is about that. And to give you some kind of measure of confidence, we are also returning the standard deviation of the values that we saw during inference. So I will not get into the details of that. If you want to learn how the standard deviation is computed, because maybe you're saying, well, it's a standard deviation, there should probably be more than one value be involved. Where's that coming from? I've tried to outline this here, but I now, for the sake of time, I will skip that. What I just want to say is, if you want to understand how confident the one prediction is, you can basically compare the value to the STD. And if the standard deviation is rather big compared to the value, then you know that the service is not very confident. And basically in these examples that I have here, the first example, you can basically compute the ratio. So we have a standard deviation of 16.9, and then how many percent of 130 is that? It's basically 13%. And so this kind of, as an intuition, the service is basically saying, okay, the value that I saw internally should be within kind of 13% of the actual value. And of course, to make this a little bit more useful, you can also use this approach to compare different confidences between predictions. So basically for the first prediction, the service is a little bit more confident than for the second prediction, because this kind of standard deviation is lower relative to the value. On the other hand, this also means you should never just compare one standard deviation with one other, because it always depends on this kind of baseline value, right, against which you need to normalize. So this is, I think, the main takeaway here. If you want kind of to wrap this up, you can also now play around maybe with your own predictions. So I have just prepared something here that you can execute here. And now we get back, just with these values, we get back that the value, or the price per square meter, is 162. And one interesting thing that you could now, for example, try is, here you have the number of convenience stores. And of course, it depends a lot, what you value in your own houses and where you want to live. But maybe some people say, hey, if I have lots of stores around me, this is good and maybe I'm willing to pay more. So we can just try this out. We can just basically say, what happens, what would the price be if maybe there would be 10 convenience stores around me, right? So let's just execute that. I've now modified this here, and now we are going from, I think 170 it was, to 233. So apparently the model has some kind of association that more convenience stores means better in this case. But of course, it's not kind of a linear relationship. I think there's also complex dependencies, or could be complex dependencies, also with the actual location that we have in here, and maybe even with the house age and so on. So this is just for the purpose of the illustration. Please feel free to plug in your own values. Maybe you can also see if a newer house also will yield a better price. I think this is maybe some other effect that I could think might happen. Okay, let me wrap it up, because I think also my dear colleague Prashant would also like to go next. In the exercise 1.4 that we just wrapped up, we've learned how you can deploy the model that you previously trained. This creates this background server process. We have also looked a little bit in how you can understand the model confidence for the individual predictions. If you want to learn more, please feel free to expand that little detail box there. And also finally, how to execute the inference request against the deployed model. So I think this is in the end what you want from machine learning. You want to basically, at least for this supervised machine learning task that the service is implementing, you want to have some prediction on, for example, yes, unseen data. So you want to have, you want a machine to tell you something about the data that you do not know yourself yet. And this is, I think, what we have achieved here. Let me wrap up the first exercise. What we looked into here, right? So overall, we looked into how you can install the Python SDK. We looked into how you can get the service key and the service instance. We understood how you can describe your data to the service using a dataset schema. We described how you can upload the data into the dataset. We learned how you can train the model based on the data. We also learned how you can select the model template to further inform the service about your specific use case. And finally, this is what we want from machine learning. We have also gotten some predictions for unlabeled data. That's it. I think I'm about to close here. One thing that you can do if you think you're now done, there's basically some cleanup code here that you could exercise. So basically, you just have to set this variable here to true, and then you can run that. And then you can also see that it's now cleaning up everything. But of course, maybe do not do that if you still want to use the notebook and yeah, maybe play around with some of the existing cells that we have here, or if you want to just try something else from the advanced exercises. All right, that's it from my side. Then thank you so much for your time and for letting me share this with you. I will now hand over to Prashant, who will proceed with the second part of the workshop. All right, then thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. Today, I would like to take you through hands-on session on intelligent approvals with workflow intelligence using data attribute recommendations. My name is Prashant Gautam, and I'm a product manager from SAP Workflow Management Service. So let's go to the next slide. So the agenda for today would be, because this is a slight break in the context. Let me just introduce you what is workflow management very quickly, and what is workflow service, and then how the workflow intelligence is there as a capability for workflow management, and then let's go to the exercise after that. So what do we have here is that SAP Workflow Management is a cloud service which actually allows you to digitize workflows and automate business processes. You can even have business logic there, and you can gain visibility by end-to-end process visibility. What we have done with that is we have embedded intelligence into it, and along with other capabilities, you will be able to see that workflow intelligence is there, which can be used for the recommendations and explanations and rule mining, etc. Again, so what is workflow service? So you have capability in workflow management which can quickly orchestrate and automate business processes, and you can use SAP Business Application Studio to really model the processes and use them and deploy them. You have activities which are like task and service activities, which can be used for calling some services and have some human activities there. And you can even have rapid UI generations with forms, and you can have specified UIs for yourself using custom task UIs. You will see how that has been done in the exercise, right? And then we also expose APIs which can be used in which can be used in many places, and you have public REST these APIs also available in API Hub. So once the workflows are ready and modeled in uh, Business Application Studio, you can deploy them and use them, and that's how the overall workflow service works out. So now in the workflow management service, there is new capability, as I told you, which is coming up, and that is coming up because we want to have a key differentiator for SAP, which is like using SAP AI Business Services internally within the products, and then that's why we have a workflow intelligence there. And workflow intelligence can be used to process participants to provide recommendations, and we are based on data attribute recommendation service. Along with that, you can have explanations, which Sudarshan told that is planned, and this will be coming in future. Besides that, we also are integrated, like workflow management is also integrated with document information extraction, where you can really start the processes by automatically without any human interactions. So this is a slide which Sudarshan has already shown you, and that's where I wanted to emphasize that what are you going to see in today's exercise, or what are you able to do in today's exercise is like create the workflow intelligence scenario, and then you can also see the recommendations in form of confidence level coming up in the task UI. So that is what you can see today and touch upon it. So let's move to the exercise. Okay, so from the GitHub repository, if you go to the readme.file, and that there you can see the exercise link. Once you go there, you will find another file where you get to know whatever Michael has already explained, all these information along with the link to my binder, and I've already opened that here. So what do we do first is to understand what is the workflow that we are looking into and what happens there. So first thing that I would like to tell you is that there's a sales order approval. I've simplified it to the core. We have only one step, which is approval step. And now for this approval step, how do we create a workflow intelligence scenario so that we can get some recommendations out of it? Some prerequisites, as Michael has already mentioned, we are limited to some of the data centers. That is the same as what Michael has mentioned. So what are we going to do today with the exercise is like first, because this is completely switch of context. So we will have a booster running for workflow management, and then preparing the service key, and then downloading it, and then as you know, all the ML scenarios require some training data. So we will also create something for a workflow intelligence scenario. And then I will show you how easy it is to have the workflow intelligence scenario configured, and then start and having the training done on that. And then finally, we will also have some confidence levels shown on the approval task. So some sections for the introduction for your reference later on. But let's go into the details of exercise 2.1, where we will run the booster. So let me go to the account. Okay. Let's refresh this as well. Okay. Let me just keep them alive. So it is this. It is very similar to how we have done. So we go to boosters and search for workflow. and you will get a booster there, and it will run. So I've already run the booster for this. I don't want to take you through that. So it takes around 4 to 5 minutes to run the booster, and it does some quota assignment. It subscribes a SaaS application and creates some instances and some destination for the internal capabilities to work properly, and then it creates some roles there. So I've already created that. So let's go back. You can create it in the parallel if you want, but I will go to the next step where you can navigate to the sub account, and then you can check whether you have the right authorities. So let me just go to the sub account and check, because these authorities will allow you to execute the next steps in the exercise. So let's go here to instances, and then go to the workflow service and check whether you have the authority. So like get context and get task context, all these authorities should be there. If you don't have it, then you can click on update, go to next, and copy the JSON file or JSON entry which we have provided in the file in the exercise, and then you can just update the instance. And once you update the instance, it may take some time to update it, and maybe some 1 minute or 2 minutes, and then the workflow service is up and running with the updated authorities. So having said that, next step would be to have the role assignments for the workflow intelligence. So what you have to do is just go there and create one role collection for yourself. I've already created one for myself here. And what do we have to do in that is just click on edit and have the proper roles. So one of the roles that we have is this one, which you can also search here when you go here, and I've already have it, so it will not be searched, but you can do that. And I've already done it. The next important thing is that you should have your user assigned to it, so that you are able to get you are able to see the workflow intelligence or configuration for workflow intelligence screens. So I'm going to cancel it. So I'm set for the next steps. So all these things are showing how to do it. Okay, give the users, and then we will download the key. And this is, as Michael mentioned, this is required for getting some credentials out of to execute some API calls. So you go here, click on the instances, and I will just download it. Meanwhile, I already have it in the file, so I can go here and I click on upload to get this. So I already have one here. So I upload this. Make sure that you rename this, because the coding that we have done is for this. So yeah, now you have the key. And so we have uploaded this, we have the key, we have renamed it. So now we are set to take to the code now directly. So I don't have a kernel here. Let me select this. Do some basic things. And now I am getting the key. So I have the key in the variable. And basically what we have done till now is that we have run the booster for workflow management. We have the correct authorization set by checking the authorities. And now we have downloaded the key, and we have the key with us now to generate the tokens. Now we are moving to the next exercise where we prepare the training data for workflow intelligence. And here, what you see is that we will go back to uh, the cockpit, and from here you can go to SAP Business Application Studio, which I've already opened here. And here we will have to get some, we have to create a dev space, which I've already created, give the name of the dev space, choose SAP Fiori, and use and select a manage workflow management here. Once you create the dev space, it might take some 5 to 7 minutes because it will be starting. It will be taking some time to load the IDE. And then once it is running, you can just click on the name of the dev space, and then you will be able to see the the application studio with a welcome page. Once you are on the welcome page, I'm going back to the exercise, and you can click on import. So before you import, you just have to download the tar file from here to your local machine so that you can import it in the SAP Business Application Studio. So what I have already done is I have downloaded that file, and I click on import and select this file and do this. So meanwhile, this takes some time. You can also catch up if you are following this by importing this file. So here it'll say that you can open this in the workspace. So I'm going to open this as a workspace. While it takes some time, I show you what we have to do next. So once this is imported, I have opened this as a workspace. Okay, so what we have to do now is to build this project and deploy it, so that we have some workflow definitions for the sales order running or deployed, so that we can run some workflow definitions. So I click on build, and during that time I can even open the workflow which we have created. And this is the same workflow which I showed you at the start, and this is the human task which is being used for the workflow intelligence scenario, where any approver will be there who will be approving or rejecting the sales order, and he will be seeing some confidence level to support him as a decision support system for himself in terms of confidence level. So that is one thing. So okay, it's taking longer than what I'm expecting. Okay, so it is done, and now we can deploy this. So if you are doing it for the first time, then it might ask you for the login and some password credentials, but I've already set up this for myself. So it is deploying directly without asking the credentials, but I have mentioned this in the exercise. So when you click on deploy, it'll ask you for the server where you want to deploy, and then provide your details like username and password. Okay. Meanwhile, while it comes up, I can take you through some of the documentation that we have. And here, if you see in what's new, that's where you will see that workflow intelligence is being shown on 29th. That workflow configure workflow intelligence. This is the document that we have, and that from there you can link. So this is the link. I have provided that in the exercise as well, and you can click this and you can see how you can do that in the help documentation as well. Okay, so see whether the deployment is happening. Yes. And during that time, you can even have the restrictions being seen for the trial accounts. There are certain restrictions, that number of workflows that you can instantiate in the trial account, so be aware of that, and look into this before you start doing it. And that's for the protection for the trial account. And it helps us also keep sane the trial accounts. So this has been deployed. So now we go back to the exercise and see now what we have to do. So here, what we have provided is a data set for sales order approval, and that's where we start looking into the data set and execute it. So dataset has some fields like sales organization, distribution channel, which division it is, which is a sold to party, what product it is, what are the rates, and everything else. And some of these things we will provide it, and we made it very simple for this exercise. We have taken some 5 or 6 parameters from here to train the model, but you can use many of them and then have your model much more precise. So so we have the model, the data loaded, and then now what do we do is we create, we get the client secret and client ID, and with that we can generate the over token. So once the token is generated, we can create the URLs for the workflow, wherein we need we need to call them to generate the data. Once we are done with that, what we do is that we take this workflow definition ID and task ID and keep it with us. This is the same workflow definition that you have seen here, which we have deployed, and this is the same task ID that we see there in this workflow. So this is the important information. We should use this to create the workflow intelligence scenario. So once you have that, we prepare some URL parts, and then finally what do we do is we start some workflows for approval sake. So let me just start it in the parallel. So what is happening in the background is that we are starting around 70 workflows just to keep the data short, where we will approve them in the later point in time, and have some data already prepared for us. Similarly, what do we do in the later part is that we fetch all these tasks which are there and approve them, so that we have a data set created for the workflow intelligence, where we have all these workflows which are completed. Okay, it is taking some time. Okay. Are there any questions? I'm just trying to follow. No. If there's something, just unmute and let me know, Dennis. Okay, so once we are done with the creation of the workflows, now what we are doing is now we will fetch all the tasks which are in ready state and then execute them to complete. Right. Now we are doing that, and all the tasks which were created by these workflow instances that we have created in the previous step will be completed now. So now we have a data set of around 70, which is approved. Okay. And in the meantime, we can even see whether these are really created. So this is SAP Workflow Management Launchpad, and you can see monitor these scenarios or these workflows, workflow instances here. And if I refresh them, they are actually getting completed because I have a filter which is only for the running ones, and then finally these things will get down to 0, and um, then we will have some set of data for at least for the positive interpretations. Okay, so this is done. We'll go back here and now to the exercise. So all these workflows are getting completed. Now what do we do is we should have a mixed set. So we should have some rejection data as well. So here what we are doing is we are creating a set of workflows or instantiating the workflows which will be ideally rejected because of whatever reasons. So now this code cell is doing or creating the workflows which will be rejected in the next steps. And going back here, you can see that some of this tasks which are being created. So there are around 30 which are already created. So and this code cell is also executed. So now what I do again, I fetch all the tasks for the rejection, and then I will complete them as well. So same process, it is now completing the workflows with rejection. So what is this will not be the case when you are there in the productive landscape. This is just for the exercise sake that we are doing this, starting and accepting some of them, and starting and rejecting some of them, so that we have some data set which can be used for our training purposes. And this is just very specific for this exercise. So in the productive landscape, you will be assume that there will be a lot of workflows which will be there, and we have that data out of the box. And so this is done. So what in the summary of this is like, now we are done with the preparation and we have a mixed set of things. So with the exercise 2.3, what we are moving to is now moving to something like configuring the workflow intelligence. And this is where you see the difference, where we really show you how simple and how easy it would be for a non-technical or non-data science skilled guy to run, to have the workflow or to have the scenarios which are based on ML. So we go back to the launchpad. So this will be there in the exercise as well. So you can go through this way, or if you are already here, you can just click on this and you'll be at the home. And at this place, as you can see in the exercise, you will again see the configuration tile here, configuration of workflow intelligence scenario tile here. And once you reach there, right now it will be empty, but what we want to show here is that UI representation of some ML based model which are in the background running, and a business user do not understand and don't want to understand much about it. So what do? I just click on create, and I have to fill some data here. So I have something already there with me, so you can also follow it from the exercise. It's given there. I'm just taking them here. So what do we do here is just give the name of the scenario and also the workflow, which I've shown you in the SAP Business Application Studio, and the task wherein you want to have that workflow intelligence scenario to be created for, and the predictions or the recommendations has to come for that task in that UI. So after that, as you have in ML models, you have to have a feature set, and this feature set is special because this is coming from workflow context itself. You don't have to get it from anywhere else. What we have done right now in the previous step is to generate all these variables already. The data is there, and in productive landscape it will be already there. So that is the beauty of it, that you don't have to look for data set, but you are already out of the box connected to the workflow context, and there you can get the data set. So I will just take some of the context variables that we saw in the workflow to be configured here. So distribution channel, sold to party, some rates, what quantity, what is the net value, and finally the label in terms of machine learning. But what do we have here is actually the decision taken by the user when he's actually going to the UI and looking into the UI and taking the decision. So we call this decision criteria because the user will be looking into all these factors and taking a decision on that. So we still have some error here. Why do we have it? We have it because we have not defined a decision. So this is finally the way workflow intelligence defines the label of the supervised learning ML model. And what we have to do further is to also look into the criterions where we see, okay, this is a numerical criterion, and this is also a numerical criterion, and this is another one where the other ones are actually categorical criterion. So this is the bare minimum information which business user or citizen developer has to give to provide this feature set to workflow intelligence. So if we are done with that, we go to the next step. And this, as I said, it is very easy. It's just 4-step configuration, and then you are done, and your model lifecycle is taken care. So here, what you see is you have to configure decision where you actually have to tell um, um, the machine that what is a negative interpretation and what is actually a positive interpretation. So for us, what we are model in this exercise is rejected, but you can have true, false, or whatever rework or whatever term that you are using in your workflows. But for now, in the sales order scenario, we are using this as rejected and approved, and this has to be modeled in the workflow. So now machine knows that, okay, I have a label called decision, and if it has a value called rejected, then it is a negative interpretation for me. And if it is having a value called approved, then it is a positive interpretation for the machine. And currently we are only supporting a binary classification. So going forward, workflow intelligence has bigger plan to have other classifications as well. But for now, we are showing, we are only supporting the binary classifications. Okay, let me just see if there are questions. Okay, no. Fine, so I go to the next step, and this is another important thing which we have picturized it, and rather than making it in the code and telling the users that, okay, after the first training, do you really want to keep, or it makes sense to have the models really retrained after a certain time. So here we support a number of records. So after every 1,000 records, there will be a retraining, which is possible, and you can configure it whatever number that you want. I will go ahead with 1,000, but after every 1,000, the retraining will start. So after the initial training, this number comes into picture. So after that, so what we do here is review what we have done. So you can even go back and edit them if you are not happy with some of them, and then proceed. And when I click on save and start training, ideally there should be a training which should trigger in the background, and it takes some time. Meanwhile, once the training starts, you will be taken back. So it has started. You'll be taken back to the list view, and that's where you see the training has started. And now internally what has happened is we have triggered a model training in DAR, or data attribute recommendation service, where this will be taken care, and the user is not worried about any coding and everything else. So once we have it, it'll take some time, some 20 minutes or something. So I have some workflow or some workflow intelligence scenario ready. I will go to that. Before that, let's go to the exercise and see where are we. So we were here. We went to the create UI. Then we showed we have entered this. Then you can use this text from here in the Jupyter Notebook to actually create the decision criteria from here and use it. And similarly for the rejected and approved, this is there. Then once the training has started, now the background process has started for the training. So we have to wait for the workflow intelligence scenario to come into ready state. So I'm not going to wait for it, but I would like to show you directly uh, where I have the workflow intelligence scenario running and active. So this is a different server where I have already done it. Meanwhile, yeah, so here you see that there is this sales order approval scenario where you have that workflow ID and task ID. The status is active, and this happened when the workflow intelligence scenario came into the ready state, and I clicked on activate. This gives you a benchmark number that how accurate your model could be, and only if you are happy with this number, then only you can click on activate. Otherwise, what will happen in the background is it will keep on retraining as per the frequency of the number of records that you have actually configured in. So we have an active scenario, and what happens after this is that it's very simple. What we have already done in the exercise, or let me just go back to the UI. So you can very easily create a UI template here, and because now this is workflow intelligence is coming out of the box, so you have queries to query the confidence level, which is generated by a active scenario, which I showed you here, which are actually generated whenever there is a new workflow instance which has been triggered. So internally, workflow intelligence scenario will query the model to get that confidence level or recommendation and store it somewhere. And that's the beauty of it, that you don't have to change anything, just change some a little bit in your UI. So let me just go to the UI. And actually it comes into model, and you just have to give the path, and it is already available. Format it a bit because it comes as a 0 to 1 number, um, floating number, and then you can just have some formatter to show it in that. So it's that simple. So you have to train you have to create a workflow intelligence scenario, activate it, change your UI, you're done. So let's go back to the, so where am I here? And I will go here and I will start a process. So here you will see that I have okay, before that, yeah, okay, so I will start the instance. I have a different data set. 1 minute. I copy paste that so that we save some time. Okay. And I will start the process. So, okay, I'm in the wrong screen. 1 minute. I should be here. And I should be starting the workflow here because we have an active scenario in this system. And we have all these fields which we configured. And it says start and close. So internally, the workflow is started and the task is also created. And ideally, the task should also be shown here. So the task has come, the number has incremented. Once you click on the task, this is my inbox where you actually see all your tasks or all the tasks which are assigned to you. And then as an approver, you either have to approve or reject, and based on the criteria here. But what do we provide now with workflow intelligence? And as I told you, it's so simple to get this confidence level here. And based on, so as I said, this is a very basic uh, um, 5-6 featured model. So the confidence levels are not so great, but this gives already a hint that what machine is thinking and what machine is proposing. So the recommendation is 62, which is well above 50%. And in that case, I choose to approve this. And there are possibilities that it will go down further for some of the scenarios where actually it is actually less. So now what we have is, let's go back to the exercise. Okay, activated the scenario, and now we have monitoring tools, and this I've already shown you. And this is how you start the workflow. And once you start the workflow, you just have to go to the my inbox and see the things. And what we have provided in the GitHub is all these things are available as a tar file, and UI is also available. You just have to have a trial account and run the boosters and start deploying it. So in the summary, what we have done till now is that we have prepared the data for the workflow. We have run the boosters, we have prepared the data, we have created the workflow intelligence scenario in just 4 steps. And then we also have enhanced the custom task UI with 1 line or 2 lines of code that shows the confidence level. And internally, the entire life cycle of the workflow or of the machine learning model is hidden, and business users can now use this scenario. Okay, so this is what I had to show and take you through. If you have some questions and if you're not able to follow the exercise, if I was too fast, just put them in the chat and I can take you through.
In the meantime, I have to say I'm super impressed with workflow management. I mean, of course, in a sense, I have to say it, but in seriousness, you know, I'm the architect for data attribute recommendation, and I typically work on kind of a lower level. So I'm more concerned with the things that I was showing in the notebook, right? So I kind of care about this flow, and it's actually all very technical. And then what Prashant and his team did, you guys really, I think, yeah, made it much more usable, right? So you really are solving a real business problem with that, and I think it's just super nicely done, right? So you basically get the confidence level, and then you can say, okay, based on that confidence level, I want to approve and reject. It's retraining automatically. I think we even got a question on that for DAR. So this is also a common concern that people have when they should retrain, if they should retrain. So this is also solved out of the box. So this kind of yeah, all I can say kind of from what I have shown, this very low level flow to what you have shown, where you put in this very polished high level experience that really adds value. So this is really, really great. So thank you from my side.
Thank you very much.
So that was the whole idea of having these two separate work sessions, wherein first we get into the technical aspects and then we show how DAR is being used. Yeah, that was the complete story that we had actually built.
Yeah.
There's one thing which I would like to add. So it's not restricted to sales orders, right? It's not restricted to any specific use case now, because we have democratized it for the business users as well as the use cases that you have. Any approval use case that you have, you can bring it here, and just simply with 4-step configurations, you can have your ML model running in workflow management, right? So the idea was to simplify it as much as possible and avoid complexity and bring the ML scenarios to more closer to the business community and who are using business processes, and we call them business process experts, who do not have that much technical knowledge and data science skills. So that makes their lives a little bit easier, and it makes more we can have more productive things rather than spending a lot of time in coding. Okay, I think there are a few more questions. If not, I can stop sharing for now. And
I think there is a question in relation to the roadmap for conversational AI. So did you see that? Maybe I can just read the question. So it's quite simple. Question is, what's the roadmap for AI business process and conversational AI? So this is Praveen asking that.
okay, there we conversational AI, we are already integrated with it, and we you can have your own chatbots already available, and we have written a lot of blog posts on that, and it's out of the not out of the box, but with some of the tweaking here and there, it is possible to use conversational AI already. Okay.
Okay, that's good to know. Maybe just to wrap that up, maybe Dennis or maybe Dennis, if you have that blog post ready, maybe you can just share it with Praveen, and that might be useful so they can get started. Yeah. By the way, maybe there's one more question. Actually, no, there's two more questions, but one thing that I also wanted to mention. So we will collect all of your questions because you have raised some great points that I think are also of interest to other people maybe who will do the workshop then later offline, just following the Github repository. We will collect it in a blog post, and I think Dominic has already shared the link earlier, and I think maybe we can also share it again so you can bookmark that, and then we should have this collected next week, and you can also check back for your reference.
There are some questions on do we have this guide available in the GitHub, and the answer is yes. Whatever I was running through was available and is available in the GitHub. You just have to go to the GitHub URL, and then in exercise 2, this is everything is available.
Maybe there's a question by Jorge. I think I just want to take that quickly. So the question is, in order to improve the velocity, can we use technology can we use technologies such as tensors or GPUs? So right now we do not have, let's say, this hardware tensor acceleration, but on DAR you will absolutely train on the GPU. So it depends on the model template that you select, but the training is definitely GPU accelerated, which is very beneficial, as you might know, for neural networks. So that is in place already.
Okay, there's one question for S4 SAP workflow in S4 HANA. There are plans, but we will take it up in upcoming releases of workflow intelligence, how we can extend and expand the data sources. So currently we are 1:1 bound with the SAP workflow service, which is a capability of SAP workflow management. But later on, there could be a possibility that we look into other data sources and get these things also connected with workflow intelligence and get those benefits out of it.
Do we have any other questions? I think Dominic again, yeah, just mentioned, thank you, Dominic, that we will have the FAQ page and we will put it in the GitHub README. Of course, yes, we cannot yet share the link to the blog post. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. But we will put it in the GitHub README, and then you can find it there. We just also had a question if, well, the data attribute recommendation is based on TensorFlow. Yes, it should be, and I think we even have a blog post on that. So I will just go ahead and share the link to that in the chat as well. Here we go. I found it. So let me just share that. So yeah, this was a question by Sudeep Sen. Yes, it's based on TensorFlow, and we have a blog post from actually last year, May last year, where we have more details on what's going on inside. So you can also learn a little bit about the deep learning technologies that we have here. Yeah. Maybe I think there's one thing that is kind of on my mind, because I think we also promised AutoML, right? And so we promised two things, right? We wanted to look into for DAR, we wanted to look into regression and wanted to look into AutoML. So regression, I think we covered with my notebook, what I presented, and AutoML is actually used under the hood now for Prashant's workflow management. So basically what we have seen is actually an application of the AutoML model template inside of workflow management. So just if you later find yourself wondering, hey, there was no AutoML, AutoML was there, just Prashant and his team packaged it very, very nicely.
Okay, there's one question about the cost in production environment. I hope this is for workflow.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, if it is there for the workflow, then currently it is coming out of the box with the workflow. If you have the workflow license, workflow management license, then it comes with that. But as I said, it is available in only 2 data centers as of now.
Mm-hmm. So that means that kind of you already have the product,
yes,
you already have the license, and then you just get the upgrade for free, and then you can do machine learning for free. Yeah, this is actually really nice. Okay. There was also maybe the question was, I think, on pricing. So maybe I can also just take that for data attribute recommendation. I will just share a link to the pricing that we have here. So I think there's a very nice pricing calculator. So I will just share that again here in the chat. Okay, I think there's also now a question to use the models. So maybe I can expand a little bit on the pricing. Sudarshan, please correct me if I'm wrong here, if we changed it somehow in the meantime. The main, let's say, cost factor when you use data attribute recommendation is the number of objects that you use for inference. So basically, if you are doing inference for lots of objects, then I think you will be built on the basis of 1,000 objects. So basically, every 1,000 objects is one billable unit. This is the main driver, which also means that, for example, data upload and also the training itself is free. So you can train as many times as you want. Of course, please keep it reasonable and don't abuse it. But if you find yourself retraining every once in a while because your data has changed, this is of course also fine. And if you need to train or try different models, it's also fine. And then there is one additional restriction on the number of deployments. If you have more than 5 models deployed, then you will also be charged for each additional model after that. So that is the two pricing factors related to data attribute recommendation. There is a question for workflow intelligence. Yeah.
Yep.
Do you want to take that?
Yes, so there are 2 questions. I think there's one question about the productive landscape, which I answered. But from the perspective of the usage of the models, you cannot use those models which are trained by workflow intelligence. They are only and specifically used by workflow intelligence, and they are not publicly available. You cannot call them through APIs. Right, that is one thing. The other thing is, can workflow intelligence be connected to on-premise as for flexible workflows? Not now, as I told you earlier, it is a possibility that we go in that direction to enhance our data sources. But all these things will come as and when we take it forward. Right now, there are no such plans. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day. Have a great TechEd, and thank you all for your time. Bye-bye. See you.